How does Trump's approach in the Middle East differ from previous U.S. policies? Trump's Middle East strategy marks a departure from traditional U.S. foreign policy. By emphasizing economic partnerships over military interventions, it focuses on forging strong ties with Gulf nations through investment deals and arms sales. The goal is to promote regional stability by encouraging economic growth and reducing reliance on U.S. military involvement. Unlike previous administrations that prioritized democratic reforms and human rights, Trump's policy is rooted in transactional relationships. By securing deals with countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the administration sought to boost the U.S. economy while reinforcing strategic alliances. A key pillar of the strategy includes multi-billion-dollar arms agreements. These deals not only strengthen defense ties, but act as a deterrent against regional adversaries like Iran. Trump's approach also includes lifting sanctions on previously isolated nations, in exchange for political concessions or economic cooperation. The idea was to promote integration and incentivize moderation through diplomacy and opportunity rather than pressure alone. In sum, Trump's Middle East vision is pragmatic and profit-driven, focused on influence through investment, not ideology. What are the key components of Trump's economic deals in the Middle East? At the core of the strategy was a landmark $600 billion investment package, with Saudi Arabia committing funds across infrastructure, energy, defense, and tech. The aim was to diversify their economy and reduce dependence on oil, while tying them closer to U.S. strategic interests. One major highlight was the announcement of a massive AI data center project in Abu Dhabi. The U.S. positioned itself as both a technology partner and regional investor, helping shift the Gulf economies toward a post-oil future. The plan wasn't one-sided. The U.S. also encouraged reciprocal investment from the Gulf into American infrastructure. Roads, energy grids, and job-creating projects at home were pitched as win-wins. Trump's administration leaned heavily on the private sector. Rather than government aid, they promoted private ventures and joint partnerships, framing the region as an untapped business frontier. These economic deals weren't just about development. They were meant to reshape alliances, making economic dependence a key tool of U.S. diplomacy. How do arms deals fit into Trump's Middle East strategy? Arms sales were not just a business venture, they were strategic leverage. Trump's administration brokered over $100 billion in arms agreements, providing allies with cutting-edge systems like missile defenses, drones, and fighter jets. These deals aimed to bolster regional defense, and in addition, to cement long-term military alliances. Recipients were not just customers, they became partners who relied on American technology and training. In addition to equipment, the U.S. expanded joint military exercises and base access. Interoperability was a key goal, which ensured that Allied forces could operate with U.S. troops in future conflicts. The military presence itself remained visible. U.S. assets were stationed in key locations, offering a forward operating footprint, without committing to major ground wars. This defense diplomacy gave America influence and revenue, without escalating direct conflict. For Trump, security was something to be negotiated, and not assumed. What diplomatic efforts were made under Trump's strategy? Perhaps the most publicized diplomatic success was the Abraham Accords. These were normalization agreements between Israel and countries like the UAE and Bahrain. These groundbreaking pacts opened new channels for trade, security cooperation, and even tourism. Behind the scenes, Trump's team worked to persuade other Arab nations to join this new regional bloc. The hope was that collective economic and strategic interests could supersede older hostilities. Negotiations with nations like Iran and Syria were also part of the plan. Instead of isolation through sanctions, there was a willingness to deal if concessions were made in return. Peace was no longer framed around ideology. It was transactional. You'll benefit if you play ball. This approach alienated some traditional allies, but drew in others more eager for results than rhetoric. The goal was to shift the Middle East away from cold wars and toward cold commerce, replacing enmity with enterprise. How did Trump navigate the region's complex alliances? Trump's policy attempted to harmonize the long-standing U.S.-Israel relationship with growing ties to Arab nations. Rather than seeing them in zero-sum terms, his administration pursued mutual gains. The Abraham Accords were central to this. They signaled a willingness among some Arab states to engage Israel not just in politics, but also in shared business, tech, and defense ventures. For Israel, this legitimization came with security guarantees. For the Gulf, it opened up access to Western innovation and defense cooperation. Palestinian leadership remained largely excluded, which drew criticism. Yet the administration argued that regional peace should not be held hostage to one intractable issue. This pragmatic balancing act reshaped regional alliances, with some being temporary and some potentially lasting. How did Trump's strategy confront Iran's regional ambitions? Confronting Iran was a top priority. The administration reinstated maximum pressure sanctions, designed to cripple Iran's economy and also to disrupt its regional networks. There were also clear deterrence moves, precision strikes, public red lines, and escalatory responses that signaled seriousness. This created tension, but also the space for diplomacy. Trump's team sought a new nuclear deal, one that addressed missile programs and regional proxies. Iran resisted, but the offer was there, a combination of pressure for leverage and diplomacy for resolution. Meanwhile, U.S. allies in the Gulf were bolstered to act as regional counterweights. They received missile defense, surveillance tools, and intelligence coordination. Iran remained a challenge, but Trump's team preferred carrots and sticks over endless conflict, and used a balance of confrontation and coercive negotiation. How does Trump's policy address post-conflict rebuilding in the region? Trump's strategy doesn't just focus on deals, it also looks at reconstruction. The administration has proposed several initiatives to rebuild war-torn regions like Syria, Iraq, and parts of Yemen through both public and private partnerships. These projects aim to provide infrastructure, education, and energy development in exchange for political cooperation. By incentivizing reconstruction, the administration believes it can pull countries away from extremist influences. Instead of relying on massive foreign aid programs, Trump encourages U.S. companies to invest in the rebuilding efforts, under the assumption that economic opportunity deters conflict. This approach positions the U.S. less as a benefactor, and more as a facilitator of development. Middle Eastern governments are encouraged to commit their own funds, stabilize their governance, and to create favorable conditions for investment. Critics argue that privatization of reconstruction may create an environment where profits are valued more than people. However, proponents suggest that without sustainable economic engines, traditional aid only delays collapse. Ultimately, the administration's vision of peace includes prosperity. Rebuilding is not just physical, it's political and psychological. And that, Trump's advisors argue, is the long-term strategy for stability in the Middle East. What were the key outcomes of Trump's recent visit to the Middle East? This past week, President Donald Trump embarked on a significant 4-day tour of the Middle East, visiting Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. This trip marked his first major international engagement in his second term, and was characterized by a focus on economic partnerships, as well as strategic diplomacy. During his visit, Trump secured over $2 trillion in investment commitments from Gulf nations. Notably, Saudi Arabia pledged $600 billion towards U.S. infrastructure and energy projects. Qatar agreed to a $1.2 trillion economic exchange, including a historic order of 160 Boeing aircraft valued at $96 billion. The United Arab Emirates committed $200 billion in commercial deals, further solidifying economic ties between the U.S. and the Gulf region. Trump's itinerary also included high-profile meetings with regional leaders. In Saudi Arabia, he met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to discuss expanding the Abraham Accords and regional security. In Qatar, he engaged with Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, focusing on defense cooperation and economic collaboration. In the UAE, Trump was awarded the Order of Zayed, the nation's highest civil honor, and visited the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, emphasizing cultural diplomacy. A notable aspect of the trip was Trump's announcement to lift U.S. sanctions on Syria, signaling a shift towards re-engagement with the Syrian transitional government. This move was met with optimism in Damascus, and indicated a potential new direction in U.S. policy. However, the trip was not without controversy. Trump's acceptance of a $400 million Boeing aircraft as a gift from the Qatari royal family raised ethical questions and bipartisan concerns about potential conflicts of interest. Critics argued that such gifts could undermine the integrity of future U.S. foreign policy decisions. Can these deals and realignments survive beyond Trump's presidential term? One risk of a highly personalized foreign policy is its durability. Much of Trump's strategy hinges on relationships, and relationships change with administrations. Allies have voiced concern. Will the U.S. honor its deals in the future? Will new leadership reverse course as was done with the Iran deal after Obama? The answer depends on institutional buy-in. Arms contracts, economic investments, and diplomatic pacts have inertia, but not immunity from politics. Trump's backers argue that economics make these deals sticky. Money motivates consistency. Once companies and governments are entangled, unraveling these entanglements becomes difficult. Still, for long-term success, these strategies must be embraced beyond partisanship, or they risk becoming the artifacts of one man's playbook. How does Trump's recent trip reshape our understanding of his Middle East policy? Trump's recent Middle East tour underscores a continuation and expansion of his transactional approach to foreign policy. By securing massive economic deals and engaging directly with regional leaders, he reinforces a strategy that prioritizes economic interests and bilateral agreements over multilateral diplomacy. The lifting of sanctions on Syria and the deepening of ties with Gulf nations suggest a willingness to recalibrate U.S. relationships in the region, potentially at the expense of traditional alliances. This pragmatic approach aims to position the U.S. as a central player in Middle Eastern economic development and security. However, the controversies surrounding the acceptance of lavish gifts and the exclusion of certain regional partners, such as Israel, from the itinerary, raise questions about the long-term implications of such a strategy. Critics argue that these actions may erode established alliances and set precedents that blur the lines between personal interests and national policy. In summary, Trump's recent actions in the Middle East highlight a bold economy-driven foreign policy, one that seeks to redefine America's role in the region. The success and sustainability of this approach will depend on its ability to balance strategic interests with ethical considerations and the maintenance of long-standing partnerships. Hopefully, this video helped clarify President Trump's Middle East policy and where it stands now. Think it will work? What should the U.S. policy be? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell if this video helped you see the region's complexity more clearly. Share this with someone that might also need an understanding of the Middle East situation. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.